I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 222 of the podcast. Welcome to the Rochester Rising podcast, where we talk with all kinds of entrepreneurs within Rochester, Minnesota, to learn their story and understand what drives them to be business owners. We release a brand new podcast every Wednesday, which you can listen into on our website at rochesterrising.org, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and really anywhere you listen into podcasts, we are there. Each Thursday, we release a short story based on a small piece of the conversation that we had with the entrepreneur in the podcast each week. We encourage you to check out both and a lot of the other stories that we have on our website at rochesterrising.org. Rochester Rising is the storytelling arm of Collider, which is a Rochester-based nonprofit that works towards an ecosystem with zero barriers to entrepreneurship for entrepreneurs with passion and a strong business idea. You can learn more about Collider and how we serve entrepreneurs within the Rochester ecosystem on our website at collider.mn. So today on the podcast, I got the great opportunity to chat over Zoom with entrepreneurial ecosystem builder Frank Jaskulke. Frank is the VP of Intelligence at the Medical Alley Association, which is a Twin Cities-based trade group for Minnesota's healthcare and healthtech industry. Medical Alley Association was launched in 1984 with the belief that Medical Alley, the place, which refers to the entire state of Minnesota, is the global epicenter of health innovation and care. Very recently, Medical Alley Association launched Medical Alley Starts, a focused set of services to lower the cost of starting, scaling, and pivoting new healthcare and health tech ventures in Medical Alley through critical and credible connections. Services for Medical Alley Starts are currently focused on access to capital, connection to talent and suppliers, and a global epicenter campaign to promote the work being done in Medical Alley around the world. We have a great conversation with Frank today, so listen in and we'll jump right to the podcast with Frank Jaskulke, VP of Intelligence at Medical Alley Association. Yeah, thanks for doing this today, Frank, and connecting over Zoom. I appreciate your time right before the weekend.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm excited to have the conversation.
So yeah, I just wanted to start for maybe people not familiar with you. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and your role in the community, and where are you connecting in from today?
Sure. Yeah, so calling in today from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I live right across the street from Loring Park, or just off of downtown. So if people are familiar with the city, that's where I'm at. I'm the VP of Intelligence at the Medical Alley Association. I'll tell you a bit about me, the role, and then Medical Alley, because it all kind of makes sense together. My background, I've done this for 16 years, so my entire professional career pretty much has been at the association. Before that, I was briefly at the state capitol, was a page, which is kind of the entry-level job of government and politics. It's literally carrying messages, physical messages, from one office to another, or to a legislator who's on the floor having a debate. And it's kind of the right out of college, you do that for a bit, you make connections, and then you go into other roles. I got lucky, and when session ended and I was looking for another job, I'd applied at Home Depot in St. Louis Park. And shout out to them, actually, they pay pretty darn well for just fresh out of school, working on the floor type of hourly job, and applied at the Medical Alley Association, which was across the street from the Home Depot. Got both jobs and clearly chose Medical Alley. It had benefits and had probably a better career potential. And I wanted to work in and around politics and policy, but aligned with science and technology. And that's really been my background in me. And in school, I studied American Indian law. It's a very fascinating area of where policy, politics comes together with a very complex history. And you have this challenge of translation, what the tribal nations want, what the American government, what the federal government wants. may not be all that different from time to time, but there's different ways of communicating and interpreting the law. In Medical Alley, my work is kind of similar. You have business, you have government, you have scientists, engineers, and doctors, business people, politicians, and ultimately they want similar things. People to get healthy, healthcare to be more affordable, good jobs and growth in Minnesota. But they have different ways of analyzing the problem and different ways of communicating what they're doing. And that communication often results in conflict. So my background, my work has been having enough empathy of each side to understand and hear them and learn from them, and then help translate it for a different part of the ecosystem so that they can find common ground, work together, and achieve that common goal. And I've had the good fortune of, as I say, getting paid to hang out with smart people who save lives for 16 years now.
That's an awesome career journey. You know, it's interesting. I've been listening to an audiobook. I believe the title of it is On Wounded Knee, about Native American history. I mean, it's fascinating. It's going to take a while for me to get through it. Like we were talking about, it's, you know, how do you find like 2-hour chunks of time if you're not commuting or doing something, you know, because this is like probably like 24 hours of probably more than that material, but so fascinating just about Native American history and parts that I knew, parts that I did not know, and very interesting, especially when you dig down into different regions and you can see that history coming through in a lot of areas.
Yeah, like the world we live in today, the pieces and parts of it are still there, and the legal issues that come out of it are so complicated and have been, you know, adjudicated for now 150, 200 years in some cases, and are no more clear today than they were 150 or 200 years ago.
So we wanted to talk about Medical Alley starts, but I think kind of before diving into that, we talked a little bit about Medical Alley Association. Can you talk a little bit more about, you know, who do you specifically serve through Medical Alley Association, and what can people come to the association to get assistance with?
Yeah. So the Medical Alley Association's a trade group akin to a chamber of commerce, but for Minnesota's healthcare and health technology industry. Think the hospitals, the insurers, and drug device digital health diagnostic companies, plus the supply chain. Started back in 1984 by Earl Bakken, the founder of Medtronic. His idea was we have this amazing health innovation ecosystem in Minnesota, one of the best places in the world to develop ways to make health better, and one of the best places in the world to receive care. He wanted to make sure that stayed true 50 years in the future and 50 years after that. So all the work of the association is wrapped up in this idea that we believe Medical Alley, the place, kind of like Silicon Valley, is the global epicenter of health innovation and care. And our job is to make sure it remains that way and that people around the world know that it's that way. If you have a great thing, but no one knows it exists, it doesn't really matter as much, right? If you're trying to sell a product, but no one knows they can buy it, it's going to be hard to make sales. This probably isn't unfamiliar to your listeners, but Minnesotans are really good at like hard work, making a great product, and then not telling anyone. One of the services we provide is we tell people what's going on. We shout it from the rooftop in Minnesota, around the US, and around the world. So for companies that need assistance, what I'd say is if you're a healthcare or health innovation company, big or small, and you have a policy issue, we can help you understand it better and advocate on it. If you have a story to tell, we want to help get that message out and help it reach a wider audience. And if you need to connect with a partner, a resource, an investor, a supplier, we want to help open that door. And those are really the core three things: policy, amplification of your vision, and then making connections so work is easier to do. Bulk of that work is actually done with small and medium-sized companies, but then, of course, also working with the global leaders, the Mayo Clinics, the United Health Groups, the Medtronics, and the 3Ms of the world.
That storytelling is so important. I think that's what originally drew me to this work, that feeling that there's such great, amazing, ingenious things going on in the community, and people should know about it.
Right? I think it is the most important underappreciated thing of ecosystem building and the opportunity that Medical Alley as a place has in front of it. We're already doing great work. And that's not to say there aren't things we need to make better or easier, but there's so much great stuff already happening that people around the world just don't know is there. Or, and we see this a lot, they might know of the things that are here, but they think it's somewhere else, right? Mayo Clinic is in Rochester, New York. I've had people ask if we have Targets in Minnesota, and I politely explained to them that fast fashion that you really love is from us, and Target's headquartered here. They think Medtronic is headquartered in California. And so even the big global brands, people don't connect that it's all in one place. And when that happens, if they're going to look for the next investment or the next place to live or the next place to start a company, they look somewhere else. If we can plant in their head the idea that all the greatest things in health innovation happen to be in one place, we're going to increase the flow of talent, technology, investment into the already great pool of innovators that are right here.
Absolutely. And I think in the end, too, people just want to be seen, going down to the small companies, too. People want to be seen and appreciated. And that means so much. And it takes so little effort and no money. It's just like appreciating people and acknowledging what they're doing.
It's such a fundamental human need, right? Recognition for the work that we do. And it's a thing, and I know you do this, I know Jamie does this, it's the work we're in is helping to provide that recognition and then create forums to amplify it, both to support the individual entrepreneur, but also to contribute to their marketing, to make the work a little bit easier. It's never easy, but if we can help lift some of the burden, isn't that a good thing?
Yep. Entrepreneurship's not a solo sport. That is
Indeed.
For sure. It cannot be. So Medical Alley Starts was launched about a month ago, right? So can you talk a little bit about what's Medical Alley Starts and how does that serve startups and investors as well?
Yeah. So medicalallystarts.com is where I direct your listeners if they want to kind of get the full story as well as engage in it. This is a focused set of services the Medical Alley Association has built to lower the cost of starting, scaling, and pivoting new ventures in Medical Alley. And I should note, when I say in Medical Alley, we refer to Medical Alley as the place. It's the state of Minnesota. The project came out of the recognition that there's this incredible entrepreneurial community here, and they run into a set of common problems. And the common problem we really distilled down to is what we call critical and credible connections. So if you have two entrepreneurs and one is well-known, maybe has started and sold a company already, and the other one is not and has not, but they are equally as skilled, the business opportunity is equally as good, one entrepreneur is going to have a much easier time than the other. And so what we're building is this capability to help that entrepreneur that they're a good person, they know what they're doing, or they have the capability to learn it. They have the product or the market, they're ready to go, but they have a gap. They don't know the right people or the right resources, and so they've got to spend a year or more just knocking on doors to try to get access to the mentors, the partners, the investors, whatever it might be. And that time increases their risk of failure, increases their cost to grow. It reduces the amount of startup activity we have in the state. There are other communities where that challenge still exists, but it's less than it is here. So what we want to do is leverage this huge network that we have in Medical Alley, the leaders of existing startups, of the big companies, of the investment groups, and make it easier for those entrepreneurs to gain access to the halls of power, if you will, so that they can spend more time focused on building their business and less time on simply trying to find the right door to open. So we're doing that in 3 areas today. One is on capital access. We work with a lot of companies that are capital intense. If you're building a biotech or a device company or even a digital health company, you can bootstrap to some degree, but eventually, especially in device and drug, you get to a point where you need a lot of money to move it to the next milestone. So we're building an investor network where we have the relationships with VCs and angel groups all over the country, understand the sort of things they're looking for, what they're investing in, how they say yes or no, and then leverage that network, that relationship, to make it easier for the investor to find relevant deal flow and for the startup to connect to and have a conversation with relevant investors. So you might say, well, can a company just go on to PitchBook and get a bunch of email addresses? Totally. But sending that cold email with no context has a low response rate, takes a ton of time. We can filter it down to say, given the stage you're at, the technology you're in, here are 3 funds that are most likely to find what you're doing relevant. Second thing we're doing is a broad resource network, simplifying the process of finding talent and suppliers. This really isn't a hard thing necessarily, but it's a thing companies have to do over and over and over again, and the little burden of it adds up. So you might need to find a marketing agency and then a regulatory consultant, and then you want to hire a marketing person. Each of those things you can do, but you spend a fair bit of time finding and validating the right resources. Well, that problem is repeated by 100 companies. So we gather that information and we can then say, well, if you're in this space and you're at this stage, here's a regulatory consultant that's most likely to fit you, or probably give you 2 or 3 options. You now save that time finding and vetting, and again can focus on building up the business. And then the third and final one is what we call the Global Epicenter campaign. It's promoting this place around the country. It's going out telling the story, telling the entrepreneurs' stories in national media, at conferences, raising the profile so that more investors, more corporates, more people want to find and do deals here. There's a whole bunch more that we're building out this year and next, but those 3 are the things we've launched with.
I think it's also important. It's basically, the on-ramp and the connector to this very broad or a broader entrepreneurial ecosystem to kind of lower barriers and accelerate the entrepreneurial process. And I think it always comes down to network, in my opinion. I mean, I've said that in meetings before and gotten blasted for it, but I'm like, most of the time people think it's money, but where does the money come? It comes from that connection, that network.
So one of the great insights, one of our board members and an advisor in this, a guy named Kyle Rolfing, who's most recently co-founder of a company called Bright Health. And all the time, he would meet with early stage entrepreneurs and they would say, I just need to raise $1 million and I'll be off to the races. That's great. Let me ask you a couple of questions and then I'll introduce you. And he said 9 times out of 10, he'd ask some basic questions about the business and go, you know what? You don't need to raise the $1 million yet. You need to do A, B, and C to get the company positioned well so you can go and successfully raise that money. And if you go and do those things, the capital raising, it won't be easy, but it'll be easier. And that knowledge gap, you can't solve it in a classroom or at a university. It's a lived experience, and you need people who have lived it to help you through it. And what is that? That's network. It is the single most important thing, and it's the thing that by us, by you and Collider and other groups pre-building, we make it easier for new entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs from underestimated communities, to access and gain the credibility, gain the resources that they need to be successful.
Yeah. It's so hard to break into a network when you don't know anybody. And having that person that's willing, to take you through that door is essential for most people, many
Right
people.
on.
So for people in the health tech space here, biomedical space, how do they access Medical Alley? Starts through the website, through a particular individual? How should they find out more?
Yeah. Easiest way, if you go to medicalallystarts.com, that's got the contact info. It'll have an email directly to me. So I have the fun of leading this program right now. We always respond. If we're a little backed up, it may take us a day or two, but we have a guarantee of we respond to everyone, and we'll always say whether we can or cannot help. Sometimes it's maybe an area we just don't have connections in. We'll tell you right away so we don't waste your time. But 99 times out of 100, we're able to do something, and it starts with send me an email and let's get to work.
So you hinted at it a little bit, but you kind of have a team, some advisors behind Medical Alley Starts. Can you talk a little bit about them and how they contribute to the vision of this?
Yeah, we have just a really an amazing group that's been helping us out. And I'd say in general, one of my favorite things about the Medical Alley startup community is that it is so supportive and so welcoming and so helpful. People sometimes they get overwhelmed because there's so much going on, but by and large, people are willing to take a meeting, willing to help. We have a group of 8 people who serve as an advisory committee that they've helped us focus and say, there's 900 things we could do, but we only have the resources to do a couple at first. So where do we start? And that's really been their role, is helping me to narrow down all the things we could do to the things we will do right now. And that's been Kyle Rolfing, a woman named Jody Hubler, who's a venture capitalist, serial entrepreneur in health IT, Lee Jones, the CEO and co-founder of Rebiotics, a microbiome biotech company, Nicole Walker, a managing partner at Arboretum Ventures in Michigan, James Kent, a serial entrepreneur in the health services and medtech space, Joe Connolly, the founder of Vasana Health, a women's health company, Morgan Clyburn, the founder of Highland Circle Innovations, which is a medtech incubator, and then Pam York, who's a venture capitalist and serial entrepreneur. And so the 8 of them have helped have helped Medical Alley to focus the program and make sure it's most relevant. They also bring a fantastic network and kind of our super volunteers. They're the first person I call if I need help or have a question, and they then make my work and the entrepreneur's work much easier.
I definitely know how that goes. You need that external team to tell you, okay, you want to do all these things. You cannot possibly do all these things as one person or 2 people. So what's like the minimal viable product to test this, get it off the ground, and just start helping people right away?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that both entrepreneurs and small nonprofits have in common: unlimited vision, highly limited resources. And so even when you know the answer, having someone external who can just help you focus, make that right call, and be able to say no and feel okay. I know I get this pressure. I give myself this pressure of I could do more. There is more to do. And it's yes, but it doesn't have to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally understand that. I live that every day.
Right? That is our world.
Yes. Yep. One thing that I've noticed over the past year, and maybe COVID has had something to do with it, I don't know, with everyone being kind of physically separated, but it seems like we have perhaps this time, like we were talking in the beginning, not having to rush in somewhere, not spending time going between places has helped us sit back and look at the big picture. But it seems like we've really worked on better connectivity over this past year. What are you kind of seeing happening in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's right on. That even though no one's cracked the networking thing in a Zoom room per se, you have an event and then how do you network? I think we're getting more networked. Zoom or Teams or whatever you use, it lowers a barrier to a meeting, right? If you reach out to me and say, let's do a meeting, I'm not having to calculate, well, is it worth not just the hour, but the time it might take to drive there and back? And the further someone is away, right now the barrier's even lower. So just even from Minneapolis to Rochester, if I were to go down to do a meeting in Rochester, I usually want to do 4 or 5 meetings and make a day out of it. Now that doesn't matter. I could do one meeting. And that seems to have become the calculus in everyone's mind, that it's just there's a lower burden, so it's more willing to take a meeting. I've seen it and I've heard it from a lot of entrepreneurs that getting connected to out-of-state investors, mentors, partners is a lot easier. I don't think geography is going to go away, but it's definitely different now and to the advantage of entrepreneurs.
Even connecting with events and things is wonderful. Like you were saying, even I know there's a lot of great events, entrepreneurship related, going on in the Twin Cities. I mean, not now, but, in general, prior to, let's say 2019, during that time, it's like a full day for us to come up and go to an event. But now that we can connect virtually to these educational things, it just opens up a lot more doors. And you honestly almost feel more connected because everyone's in the same position.
Right. And it starts to make me wonder if we're only scratching the surface of that, of all the different things that different organizations would sort of have to repeat, right? Like Medical Alley and Collider could do the exact same event, but one in the Twin Cities and one in Rochester. And that a year ago would have been necessary because maybe some would come up from Rochester or some from Minneapolis would go down there, but not enough to really connect. Well, now it might be maybe Collider puts it on and all we have to do is promote it. And there's one event capturing both. Or there was this, was a Midwest Tech Connect that just happened, a regional investor meetup where it was like 1,500 investor and startup meetings went on all across the Midwest with investors from around the country because it was all virtual. So instead of 10 groups doing an event and maybe getting 50 people, there was one event with 1,500.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a very different environment as we continue moving forward with everything. I don't think it'll go back to being as it was, which probably won't be a good thing. Just like you said, opens up, makes things more accessible to everybody. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see what innovations happen to connect people as we move forward.
Right.
So you said when we first started, when you're figuring out what to do with your life, it was Medical Alley or Home Depot, and really driven by that like policy, advocacy, and work. What keeps you coming back to this type of work? Why are you passionate about what you're doing today?
Yeah. It's a combination of like the nerd in me. I like the tech stuff. My favorite TV show is How It's Made. There are 32 seasons of it. Now that I have Discovery Plus, like I can just watch them on demand. So part of it is there's always new companies, new technologies, and new advancements. Part of it is it's such a good and positive thing. And as a Minnesotan, it's really a thing we can hang our hat on. Like I tell people Minnesota is like Medical Alley, Honeycrisp apples, Prince. Like we've got those things. And there's a bunch of others, of course, but like we've got a couple of really big things we've done. Healthcare is one of them. And then personally, I've been through it. Like we're all patients. We've all been consumers of it. I've been a big consumer of it and of Medical Alley innovations with like 2 medications I take that were developed at Mayo Clinic, had surgery there, still get care at Alina Clinic in the Twin Cities here, where like I've experienced the other side of being a recipient of innovations developed by people in this community who wanted to make healthcare better. And it means I get to be here today doing this. So it's very like personally motivating and it's just cool. Like there's just cool stuff going on that's fun to see up close.
Yeah. So you said one of the pillars of Medical Alley Starts is this storytelling component and amplification of what's going on. So my final question for you, what's going on in Medical Alley right now that you think everyone should know about?
Yeah. My favorite big story that's going on in Medical Alley right now that I don't think is getting the attention it deserves, but will eventually, is we're very hard on ourselves. We're big critics of the failings of our community. We're not talking enough about the successes that are right in front of us and how that is going to change what the rest of the world thinks about our community. So there's a company called Preventus, spun out of Mayo Clinic, just acquired by Boston Scientific in Minnesota. So it was a Minnesota startup based in Minnesota, acquired by the Minnesota business unit of Boston Scientific for $1 billion+. That's a big story. You have a company called Bright Health that there's now news reports coming out about them likely going public. They've gone from zero to a gigantic company in like 4 or 5 years and could go public for a very large amount. You've got Rebiotics that's probably going to be the world's first microbiome therapy to get an FDA approval. You've got companies like CVRx that have developed implantable therapies for heart failure. There are a bunch of startup companies poised on the brink of major exits or IPOs or other big transformational events that'll be national news, or at least national news in the audiences we care about. That's going to put a spotlight on Minnesota, on Medical Alley, and investors and smart people and companies are going to come looking. They're going to go, well, if that happened there, I want to see what else. And I think the biggest story is going to be all the amazing companies that are a few years behind the Brights and the CVRXs and the Rebioticses of the world, that when those groups come and knock on our door, we're to be able to show them, oh yeah, it wasn't just a one-off. We didn't get lucky. This is what we do every day, and you've just been missing out. So I think that's the biggest story, that there's this huge bolus of companies ready to pop, and it's going to bring big national attention, and I think we're prepared for it.
That was my last question for you. I'll ask you for any final thoughts, and where is the best place for people to find more about you and Medical Alley Association and Medical Alley Starts?
Yeah, medicalalley.association.org is our main website, and medicalallystarts.com is the Starts website, but you can also link to it from our regular site. Last comment I'd make is I hope the listeners appreciate how much, Medical Alley cares about this community, how much organizations like Collider and Medical Alley and Greater MSP and Launch MN, how hard we are all working to try to create an environment that makes your work easier, because we want to see more health innovations that help more patients, more jobs created in this state because of your work. So my last message would be, reach out, tell us how we can help, tell us what gaps you still see, and put us to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We love more work, right?
Yeah, I know.
No, that's the mission. That's the mission is, an environment where people can easily connect in and find what they need to just keep going, right? Mm-hmm. To just keep going to that next step as quickly as they can.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for this wonderful conversation today, Frank. It's been a while since we've seen each other in person.
I know.
We even talked on Zoom. I can't even remember the last time. So I was thinking, I actually think you were the very first interview for the precursor to Rochester Rising that I ever did.
Oh,
so
really?
5 years later.
Heck yeah. Good to be back. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
I don't think we did a podcast, but yeah, you were one of the first interviews. I'll have to find that. Maybe I'll link it in the show notes if I can find that story again. But
Very
thanks so
cool.
much for your time. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much to Frank for connecting virtually with us from Minneapolis and sharing more about Medical Alley Starts. For more information and to connect with Medical Alley Starts, check out the links in our bio. that's a wrap for our podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending some of your time learning about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Rochester, Minnesota, and across the state of Minnesota in this episode. It's a huge help to us if you make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen in, and if you rate the podcast so that others can find it. Thanks for spending some of your time with us today, and we'll be here next Wednesday with a brand new episode.